BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. BlackBoxNed88 on Instagram for the bonus podcast. And just a quick reminder, every Monday is Zodiac Mondays. Wednesday is an Ask Me Anything. That's an AMA, so please drop your questions below for things that you would like discussed here on the show. And Friday is an Anything Goes. Any subject is fair game, mostly talking about true crime, serial killers, the Zodiac Killer, but any subject is welcome. All right, so please share some ideas in the comment section about what you would like to hear about on this channel, and let's get started. Okay, hello everybody. Today is Wednesday, time for the AMA. Welcome to the show. We're going to begin with a couple of announcements, and these have come from people here on YouTube, as well as in the DMs on social media. Multiple people have either asked the question or made a variant of the comment that, has my comment or theory been deleted because people are afraid of it? Have you been instructed by anyone to not talk about certain subjects? Has Tom Voigt ever asked you not to share anything or discuss a particular theory or to have something censored? And mostly people say this in regards to having their comments deleted. I want to be 100% clear. I have probably deleted less than 5 comments since this channel has been up and running. They get auto-deleted by YouTube. It's not coming from me. But more importantly, no one has ever been censored. No one has ever been blocked or banned or asked to not listen to this program because of something that they've shared in the comment section about a true crime theory. There have only been like 2 times when someone has been blocked, and that's because they've either made some type of threatening statement or they've made some type of abusive statement towards someone or their family members. And yeah, things like that happen, but once again, less than 5 times in the entirety of this channel. No one has ever been censored because of a true crime theory, because they believe that something happened in the world and they want to share their version of the events, the story that they believe to be true. And more importantly, no one has ever requested that. Not Tom Voigt, not anyone that I've corresponded with has ever requested, hey, please don't talk about this subject because I don't want to hear it on the show. No one, not even in the comments section has anyone ever said, don't talk about that subject because it's not something that I want to hear about in regards to the true crime theories. So, I just thought it was important to make that announcement. And the second announcement is that the episodes that have been done on the murder of Joan Webster from 1981 have been assembled into a playlist. And if you haven't heard those yet, I would invite everyone to listen to that. There will be some links posted here. And it not only talks about the murder of Joan Webster, but a possible Zodiac connection to Gareth Penn's suspect Michael O'Hare and another murder victim, Marie Iannuzzi, whom we were talking about in the bonus episode on Saturday. All of this is connected in a variety of ways, and that playlist on the murder of Joan Webster is once again available here. The first comment that comes to us is one that deserves a shout-out, giving a big shout-out to Howard Davis, who has written into the channel. Howard Davis is the author of The Zodiac Manson Connection, and he found my episode, The Zodiac Manson Conspiracy, and Howard Davis says, ready to answer questions about why and how I got into the Zodiac case and to correct your analysis, Howard Davis. And I'm just like, bring it on. All of it attacks anything on me. Feel free. My weakness is I'm a poor typist, but I will do my best. I'm open to an interview where I can talk freely. There are numerous errors you are making. My time is limited, but we can focus. I would have done anything to avoid researching the family and Manson. I find them repulsive, but if I knew I began my research since 1987. I had to follow 1974, some information that transpired into my apartment. And that was the end of the comment there, but the long story short is, I would love to talk more with Howard Davis about the Zodiac Manson connection. I've responded to him, and hopefully we can set something up in the future, but I really appreciate that he has written into the channel to contribute something. That episode, though, the Zodiac Manson conspiracy, talks a little bit about Howard Davis's material, but the stuff that I was really critical of in that one involves some anonymous blogger on YouTube, which firstly is the best place to get all forms of information, who was talking about how he did not necessarily believe that Bruce Davis was the Zodiac Killer, but instead the Zodiac Manson theory is that 3 different people from the Manson family committed the murders that took place in 1968 to 1969. Bruce Davis seems to have a rather solid alibi for the Lake Herman Road murders in 1968, saying that he was in England as well as visiting other parts of Europe, but he was out of the country. So, that was just a more far out theory that someone else was talking about, and that blog is called zodiacmason.blogspot.com. I think it's still up and running, if I remember correctly. But hey, Howard Davis, big thank you for listening all the same. So, going on to our next comment, this one comes to us from Swanky Butters, who says, 90% chance it's Arthur Lee Allen. And this was not on an episode about Arthur Lee Allen. This was on one about Rick Marshall, which came out recently. The ongoing series, Zodiac AMAs, that is on this channel. Always a good time to like and subscribe if you want to follow any of those. 90% chance it's Arthur Lee Allen. So, what do we make of that? Arthur Lee Allen was mostly exonerated from the Zodiac Killer mystery, right? DNA, fingerprints, the side palm print, also known as writer's palm, meaning that, well, the first point is, that stuff, the DNA and the side palm print, those are from the letters, not the crimes themselves. People have always been thinking about that. You've been skeptical of that. I've been thinking about that as well. Everybody in every corner of the internet has talked about that the real things that allegedly exonerated Arthur Lee Allen were from the letters. But here is something that is even a little bit more substantial. The angle that people look at with Arthur Lee Allen and the Zodiac Killer mystery is that he could have been an active participant, not meaning that he was the architect of the whole thing, that this was a one-man operation, that he was even the leader of what was going on, but an active participant. This could be as simple as he was the guy that carried somebody else's letters to the mailbox and dropped them in, like an errand boy, or he could have been a lookout, or he could have been the shooter at Lake Herman Road. I mean, there are all these different true crime theories that involve Arthur Lee Allen, and the reason why people can't get away from him is not simply because Robert Graysmith wrote a book about Allen in 1986, or published it in 1986 anyway. It's because the police had Allen as their prime suspect. He was the suspect that they publicly identified. And to the credit of Tom Voigt, who shared some info with me about the Zodiac hoax theory, but it's relevant to Arthur Lee Allen, he wanted to make the very bold statement in those comments that Arthur Lee Allen was not Graysmith's suspect. Graysmith wasn't writing the search warrants. Graysmith wasn't directing the police to go into Allen's home. Graysmith wasn't... He didn't have any power over the police at all. They were looking into Arthur Lee Allen well before Graysmith even started writing the book Zodiac that was published in 1986. So there are reasons why people come back to Arthur Lee Allen, but the ways that people zone in on him now is thinking that maybe he didn't commit all of the Zodiac murders, but instead he was a criminal in his own right, child molester, maybe involved with some other types of crimes, and he could have been an active participant in the Zodiac murders. Swanky Butters, thank you for that comment. Okay, going on to our next one, and it comes to us from Ogford P. Doggy, who says, "This dude talks weird." You know, I never thought I would live to see the day when Ogford P. Doggy would tell me that I talk weird. Nothing else to say about that, except Ogford does have one comment that we will be using later on in the AMA that is going to be talking about Maura Murray, so please stay tuned. Our next comment comes to us from Ray Grant, who has something to share on the episode The Murder of Marie Iannuzzi, which was a bonus episode that came out last Saturday, and he says that Gareth Penn, author of the book Time 17, talks about Leonard Paradiso, an alleged serial killer from Boston, and the Marie Iannuzzi murder, beginning on page 193 of Time 17. So I really do thank Ray Grant for that, and he has also sent me a copy of the later sections of Time 17, and I would actually like to read that page 193 right now. But first I'll give a little bit of an introduction to the murder of Joan Webster. She disappeared from Boston Logan Airport in 1981, November of 1981, actually returning from Thanksgiving, and she was found nearly 10 years later in 1990, killed by blunt force trauma. Her remains were discovered in the woods of Massachusetts. To keep the story short, Marie Iannuzzi was murdered in 1979 on August 12th in the early AM hours, and later that same day, they found her body by the Pine River, and she was strangled with a scarf tied in a double knot, and the authorities were trying to blame this individual named Leonard Paradiso for both of these crimes. And Ray Grant sent me this page 193 here of Gareth Penn's Time 17, a much appreciated, and I always welcome when published writers check out the channel. So let's just read page 193 right here. After a year, I had first gotten in contact with the Websters. Terry Webster called to say that there was another suspect in the murder of her daughter. This person was named Leonard Paradiso, and there were a lot of things about him that made him look likely. She told me that the strongest evidence was a jailhouse confession that Paradiso had made, in which he admitted to two fellow prisoners that he had murdered Joan Webster and somebody named Marie Iannuzzi. I didn't get a lot more detail than that, and since I didn't know at the time what to make of it, I was inclined to believe that she knew what she was talking about. The events of February 1984 completely changed my mind, and subsequently I found out a lot more about Paradiso. And there's one sentence, though, on this page that says, "The more I found out about Paradiso, the less the story made." I want you guys to just hear me out on this. The narrative that had been established about Leonard Paradiso committing the murder of Joan Webster is something that might make sense on the surface. Gareth Penn is being very clear right now for once in his life. I mean, there's some real clarity here. The original superficial story, it makes sense. They have this guy Leonard Paradiso, who is allegedly trying to operate as a black taxi or an illegal taxi, and he sees this young woman, Joan Webster, age 25 years old, arriving at Boston Logan Airport, and they're saying he came to her on the presumption that he is a taxi driver, an illegal taxi driver. Hey, I'll drive you where you want to go. It'll be less expensive if you come with me. And he goes along with Joan Webster. He takes her to his car, and then they leave. Then Leonard Paradiso takes Joan Webster to an undisclosed location, an unknown location, sexually assaults her, maybe even murders her there. And then he takes her body onto a boat and dumps her body somewhere in the water. This was the narrative they were trying to establish. On the surface, it makes perfect sense. A sexually motivated crime, someone was in a vulnerable place, they just wanted a good deal on a black taxi, and they thought that they could trust the guy. Obviously, it was wrong. The boat that they were talking about sank in the summer of 1981 and didn't even exist at the time, and they've actually even resurrected it, if that is the word, like it's been lifted from the water, and there wasn't any evidence there to connect to the Webster murder, not that there should be if it's been in the water for months. But also, Joan Webster's remains were found on land, not buried at sea. They weren't found in the harbor. So the more you look into Leonard Paradiso and the story the authorities tried to establish, it doesn't seem to work out too well. I would like to keep reading what Gareth Penn has written here. The confession reported by two murderers, one of whom had been under a death sentence at the time, and he reported the supposed confession. The other informant had murdered his own girlfriend, a relative of hers, convicted of felony himself, was about to be sent to prison where her murderer boyfriend was incarcerated. The first convict got his death sentence commuted, and eventually got a retrial at which the state declined to put on any evidence against him. This time he was acquitted of the charges, for which a grand jury had originally condemned him to die. The other convict was transferred to another prison in exchange for his testimony against Paradiso. Both men obviously had bought their lives with their evidence against Paradiso. For his part, Paradiso having uttered this confession. All three men took polygraph tests, and even though two diametrically opposite stories were being tested, all three passed with flying colors. First, I would like to begin with the fact that polygraph tests in the 1980s were conducted in a different way, and they definitely weren't very reliable. I actually put a lot of stock into the polygraph methods that are used today. They have some new things like the computerized polygraph system, but I would like to read off our next comment from Walter Sobchak, who says, Iannuzzi and Paradiso are both mob names. Joe Dogs Iannuzzi and Mickey Paradiso, one a capo for the Gambino, and another is an associate. Big thank you to Walter, and Eve Carson, author of the book Mommies and Mole, has corresponded with me, and she's also shared about how one of the suspects in the case, someone named Andrew Palumbo, could have also been running with the mob, or they're heavily involved in this, heavily embedded, indeed. The jailhouse informant that turned over this confession, one of them anyway, is named Robert Bond, and Eve Carson and her private investigator both interviewed Robert Bond together, and they said he didn't have the mental faculties to come up with a story like this. In short, he was coached and coerced, or more like just coached into saying these comments about the actions of Leonard Paradiso, and Eve Carson definitely believes that there was a cover-up, a murderous cover-up, with Joan Webster, as well as with Marie Iannuzzi. Her prime suspect for the murder of Marie Iannuzzi is actually Marie's own boyfriend, who was named David Doyle. This is all back in 1979. Our next comment comes to us from Jamie Hendrickson, who has something to say about the Zodiac Killer suspect Don Chaney. This was on a recent episode called Zodiac Don Chaney AMA. And he says, Chaney checks a lot of boxes. However, Chaney lived into the 2000s. Is there a good explanation for why he quit killing and writing? I have always thought that the Zodiac is either dead or incarcerated by the 1990s. Why would he not comment on the New York Zodiac's appropriation of his brand and MO? And that's the New York Zodiac copycat who was named Eddie Sada. Eddie Sada was captured actually in a rather unfortunate way. If I recall the story, Eddie Sada, the New York Zodiac copycat, was a serial killer, but his sister had her boyfriend over in the house, and they got into an argument, and he ended up pulling a gun and shooting his sister in the butt. I mean that, in the buttocks, and he didn't want to go to jail simply for being known as the guy who shot his own sister in the buttocks, so he confessed to being the New York Zodiac Killer, and it does indeed seem that they got the right guy. It wasn't a fictitious confession, but, well, I guess that didn't happen with the Zodiac mystery in California, I guess. But here's the other fact, though. Only 2 people visited Eddie Sada during his first year in prison, and one was his mother, and the other was his sister, whom he had shot in the butt. So that gives you some insight into the way their family functioned. But with this question here, if Don Chaney is the Zodiac Killer, is there a good explanation for why he quit killing? The first thing I did with this one is I sent it over to Drew Beeson, who hosts the show The Zodcast, available on his channel of his name, Drew Beeson, and I recommend his show The Zodcast. And I wanted to hear his response to that question about why would Don Chaney stop killing if he was indeed the Zodiac Killer. Drew Beeson is the author of the book Citing It on the Zodiac Killer, which looks at Don Chaney as a Zodiac suspect, and his response is, I would first say that if the Zodiac was not Chaney or Allen or a pair, why did he not ever comment on Allen being the prime suspect, especially after the Graysmith books and Fincher film were put out? That would have been far more tempting than the New York Zodiac copycat. I think the Zodiac / Don Chaney completed his masterwork after the Stein murder and was content not to kill anymore, but had planned to come back into the case via Arthur Lee Allen. I also believe that Don Chaney was quite possibly the author of the New Canaan letter and ciphers that were sent from Connecticut in 1988, as Cheney had ties to the state. Both his children and ex-wife lived there at the time. I think it could have been like the Golden State Killer, where he wasn't in jail but just stopped killing for some reason. For Cheney, also could have been in fear of getting caught if he was looked at as a potential suspect after bringing Allen forward in 1971. That's my take, and I appreciate the response from Drew Beeson. The only other additional things I would add to this, as an attempt to answer the question, if Don Cheney was the Zodiac, why would he stop killing in the 1960s or 70s? Most people would instantly think that the Zodiac Killer said that he was going to continue to commit crimes. He just wouldn't report them or announce them the way he had done so in the letters. There are some reasons for this. The way a serial killer functions is some are sexually motivated and some are not. Most people believe that the Zodiac Killer wasn't driven by urges to kill or sexual urges. It was about creating a criminal masterpiece loaded with mathematical signatures, and you can even hear some great episodes of the infographics show that talk about this. I mean, the early parts of the episodes aren't very good, but they has really good challenges at the end, like challenge questions, and one of them was, do you believe that the Zodiac Killer stopped killing because he had completed his work? It was about creating this thing that isn't about the desire to kill. It's about having these murders in places that match up with mathematical signatures or some type of designed motivation. It's a motivation by design, not by some type of sexual compulsion or sexual desire. So if the criminal masterpiece is complete, then the criminal masterpiece is complete, and there's no reason to kill again. But here's another point. No matter who your suspect is, whether it's Don Cheney, Arthur Lee Allen, or anybody, many people think that these were thrill kills. These were a set of murders that took place in 1968 and 69, and the person behind them was just doing this as a type of over-the-top thrill kill criminal masterpiece, right? After the shooting of Paul Stein on October 11th of 1969, the killer realized that was way too close to getting caught. Therefore, I'm not going to kill again, or I'm not going to do it in this way again, because that's just it. Instinct took over, and that was way too close. And there's some other responses to this. As a serial killer gets older, there is a decrease in testosterone, which makes them less likely to kill. And there's also a theory out there that, well, if a serial killer goes inactive and they stop killing, then they just will not start again. That definitely is not true, by the way, 100%, but it could be done frequently, because with most serial killers, like we had this example of the Golden State Killer, mostly he had a reign of terror from about 1973 to 1986, and then he resurfaced with some criminal activities later on in his life. As I said, it's not perfect, but the majority of his crimes happen within that span, which is known as the reign of terror or the period of activity. The reasons why that takes place is brain chemistry, urges, testosterone, and once the reign of terror ends, the period of activity ends, not all serial killers will restart. It's not a perfect science, but there are observations that people make. And then, once again, this isn't necessarily about Don Cheney anymore. Some people think that the reason why the Zodiac changed his MO after 1969 is he was a high-functioning paranoid schizophrenic, and that he just did things in an odd way, psychosis lacking logic and such. This is more relevant to suspects like Richard Gaikowski, Ross Sullivan, and of course Theodore Kaczynski. But our next comment comes to us from Planet X Filmworks, who says, "Great show. I agree there is a ton of interesting material on Rick Marshall. I'm just not sure it's enough. Recently I did an episode for the Zodiac Monday segment called Zodiac Rick Marshall AMA. And that's it, though. There's a huge case that you can make for Rick Marshall. There is a huge case that you can make in favor of him being the Zodiac Killer. But Rick Marshall is someone who is just, in my opinion, a really weird guy who was also milking the spotlight a little bit too much. He's the guy who's making the comments like, well, if there is a Zodiac Killer out there. I mean, he's probably my doppelganger. He's probably exactly like me. I mean, it's not me, but it seems like someone who's exactly like me. He's making all these comments like that, and then he also wrote a weird email to Tom Voigt. But that's just what I see Rick Marshall as. Someone who would have had the brain for it. Someone who actually fits that gifted underachiever profile of someone who's of above average intelligence, but works as a projectionist in a movie theater, or works as an engineer for a radio station. But did he actually kill anyone? I am far from convinced. Not only am I not convinced, far from convinced, based on how much of a leech he was to just the spotlight. Hey, the camera's on me now. Time to showboat. That type of effect. But that's just my take on the subject. I'm always open to new comments and feedback and what other people would want to share. So we have something different to do right now, and I would like to give a shout out to Sherry, who wrote into the email. Anybody can write the show at BlackBoxOnlineRadio@AOL.com. And Sherry gave me my first ever opportunity to try and make contact to a Zodiac Killer suspect. And I think I'll just read the email and then we can see how this turned out. And I am currently in a terrible way. California authorities have really let me down. Please tap your resources and see what you can do. It's a 100% positive identity, no guessing. As mentioned below, California authorities are a dead end. Please do not kick it to cold case file workers. They will not care. But my therapist, and I'm going to give him an alias because this guy is still alive. We're going to call him Arthur Franks, with a counseling service in California, who is 78 years old. He is a brilliant therapist and attorney, overachiever focused on therapy and criminal activity, which is why I started digging into his true identity. Arthur Franks is 100% the Zodiac Killer. He recently changed his extensive 56-page CV to about 36 pages, showing he was not in Northern and Southern California in 1967 to 74. A bounty hunter from Santa Rosa traced Arthur Franks's electric bills back to 1968 and found that he was in California at the time, and he was living in, well, I might as well not say that as well. Arthur Franks has a degree in psychology, and he has been to various universities as a speaker. I've learned a lot about him from Guy McPherson's podcast as well. So that goes on for a while. But the thing is, though, she also provided me with the phone number in email from Arthur Franks, and once again, that's an alias, not giving out his real name. But I tried to make contact with him. I wrote him, and he did not respond yet. And I got his voicemail, and it is the right number. So my first attempt to contact a Zodiac Killer suspect, although it did not work too well, but so Sherry goes on to say here that if you solve the artwork on the Zodiac Halloween card, it will reveal the name of her suspect, Arthur Franks, although that isn't his legal name. That's just what I'm calling him here. She says, over 50 years, no one has solved the mystery of the Halloween card artwork. Well, maybe Ned from Black Box Online Radio has, because if you look at my solution, you can find an R, G, S, and J, and can you think of anyone who has those initials? But also, I mean, there was this video that we reviewed from Skating Crow Productions that talks all about how the true inspiration for the Zodiac Halloween card could have come from T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland, and they're just different lines in the poem that are connected to the Halloween card that was mailed on the 27th of October, 1970. And there are some things about, like, for the name Arthur Franks, for example, there is a backwards S, there's an upside down A, there's an F that's forwards, there's a Z and a crosshair symbol, so it reveals Arthur Franks, Zodiac Killer, and she says she has cracked that. I saw the Halloween card and knew in 2 seconds that the 51-year-old mystery art is Arthur Franks. First he denied it, and weeks later I presented him with too much evidence to deny. He came very clean. A heavy 51-year-old burden to carry. He unloaded. I tried to contact the guy to get his side of the story. Now, listen to anybody. if you're going to try and extract a confession about the Zodiac Killer, please get it recorded. I mean, I don't care if you have to use the internal recorder on a cell phone, or if you have to use one of those old-fashioned cassette players. Please record these Zodiac Killer confessions. Otherwise, this is just hearsay. This is just what somebody else told you. It really is an enormous email that was written here, but there's an interesting point, though, about the 408 cipher in Sherry's email about her suspect, Arthur Franks, and that is that there are 18 letters at the end of the 408 cipher that remain uncoded, and she says, firstly, there are 18 symbols in I am the Zodiac Killer, if you write that out, and then if you use Arthur Franks with his middle name, then you'll see that there are 18 letters in his name. Just sharing that. And there's one line here that says, it's difficult to get people to act on this. I have a criminal case against him 4 days a week as a prowler from May of 2020 until I fled my apartment. Arthur Franks uses a hypnotic illicit drug in therapy and at my home, and uninvited as a prowler, along with other drugs like GHB, ketamine, and he used these to commit sexual crimes. Wow. These are a lot of accusations here, and I'm being 100% crystal clear now. Arthur Franks is not the guy's legal name. I know I've said that 3 times now, but when you're going to accuse someone who is still alive and still working and still practicing of not only being the Zodiac Killer, but a host of other criminal activities, I do think it's important to hide that person's identity, especially for crimes that they have not been charged with yet. So, thank you to everybody who has listened to part 1 of this discussion, and we'll be right back after this, and I will get to some of the other questions for the AMA. Okay, stay tuned. Bum ba bum 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 ba bum 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 ba bum bum bum. At this time, I would like to talk about some of the ways in which you can help Black Box Online Radio. This channel relies on your support, and the best way you can help out is just by listening to some more content. If you like what you hear, you can hit that like button, subscribe, and share with your friends on social media. But I should also say that Black Box Online Radio now has a TeeSpring page, and there will be some links in the description box. Please feel free to check out some of the merchandise that is available. Almost all sizes and colors are listed. So, you can also help out by going over to the Zodiac Killer channel and watching the documentary series Obsession into Darkness, parts 1, 2, and 3. I was one of the contributors for that, and you can see some other great Zodiac content on the Zodiac Killer channel. And yes, there will be a part 4 of Obsession into Darkness at some point in the future. And for now, let's get back to the show. Okay, hello, and we are back. Right now I would like to talk a little bit about the disappearance of Maura Murray. Maura disappeared after crashing her car in Haverhill, New Hampshire on February 9th of 2004. I was about to say that she crashed her car into a snowbank, but that's even open to debate and discussion. There are people out there who simply do not accept that, and they think that there's a little bit more going on that the investigators even overlooked, and there are other people think that the whole setup was completely staged. But I said at the beginning that there was a comment that came from Ogford P. Doggy, and this was on our episode, Maura Murray, All Is One Theory. And Ogford P. Doggy's comment was, this dude talks weird. His first theory is not a theory, but talking about the basic facts of the case. And I do think it's important to have somewhat of an introduction when talking about a disappearance, a missing persons case, or any true crime case in general. But as we said, Maura allegedly crashed her car in Haverhill, New Hampshire, and she's never been seen since. The last person to see Maura Murray alive was someone named Butch Atwood. He was driving a school bus, and his version of the events is that he saw Maura Murray, he asked her if she needed help, and that she needed him to call someone, and she said no, she had already called AAA, but Butch Atwood knew that wasn't true because they didn't have cell service in the area, so by the time Butch got home, and his wife had called the authorities to alert them about Maura, there was the famous line, I have no idea where she is, and still to this day people do not know what happened to Maura Murray. So this was from an episode called All Is One Theory, and I wanted to present this episode in a way that could look at many of the major possibilities, but what if they all happened? Like, some people believe that Maura Murray left the scene of the accident and she got into trouble, and then she had some sort of accident happen to her later on, and then she died in the woods, succumbed to the elements. Other people think that she was abducted and murdered, and then there's even the possibility that Maura committed suicide. So what on earth is the all is one theory? I mean, I want to be very clear about that and reiterate some things from that material. And I should also say that that is one that was requested. Somebody asked me, like, are there any lesser known theories in the Maura Murray case that you would like to talk about? And this was the first one that came to mind, meaning that after the car crash, or after Maura Murray leaves her abandoned car, then she perhaps begins to run. Maura Murray was a cross-country runner. Maybe she did run over a bridge or run on some rough terrain. She trips and falls. Someone comes by to assist her. She gets into somebody's car, and then that person drives her to a location, attempts to do something bad to her, like, I mean, maybe even sexual assault, maybe even trying to murder her. Then she gets away from that person, and then she's just going into the woods, and then decides to give up, and then some other unfortunate circumstance happened to her, and that led to her death. Meaning all of the major possibilities that people look at could have happened to Maura Murray on the night that she disappeared. That would insist that Maura Murray has passed away. Am I saying that I know everything? No, absolutely not. And as far as Maura Murray deciding to run away from the crash site, I mean, they talked about this on the Missing Maura Murray podcast, but if somebody is running, the chance of freezing to death is much higher. But the search dogs that went looking for Maura lost her scent 100 feet from the crash site. Many times I misreported it as 100 yards. It's 100 feet from the crash site. So, that's really not very far. Many people believe that she entered somebody's car, but also, I've even really thought strongly in recent months, and it's just an idea that has come to mind, that maybe she was abducted by a woman. I mean, if she refused help from Butch Atwood, a male bus driver, Aaron from 107 Degrees laid it out very clearly, saying she was probably very intimidated by Butch Atwood, the bus driver. Or maybe she's thinking as a 21-year-old woman that I want to solve the problem myself, so maybe she's going to walk to the nearest town to get some type of roadside assistance. And a woman came by and offered her a ride. Then the woman drove her somewhere, and some unfortunate incident happened to Maura Murray. Her next comment comes to us from 15 Lee, who says, what are the chances whoever found her leaves, and then another person comes within minutes and possibly asks if she needs help, since it's likely not a serial killer, and then that just leaves her there, even when he knows there's no cell service. I mean, like, I think he's talking about the bus driver, Butch Atwood, and, would he have really left her there? Um, it's possible. I mean, a lot of people really suspect Butch Atwood, and they think that he could have been covering for somebody, or that he falsified his statement. He did fail a lie detector test, but from the beginning, the Missing Maura Murray guys were saying that they thought it was due to Butch Atwood's medications that would have affected his sensory levels and so on. Well, what would have happened that if Butch Atwood had been telling the truth and just 5 minutes later, 3 minutes later, somebody drives by and offers Maura a ride? I mean, it seems like that's the road that people are going to use to get between 2 points. But I would actually like to go to the next comment from Jonathan C., who says, a lot of what Guy Parody said on the 107 Degrees podcast is very unreliable. If you haven't heard 107 Degrees, which is hosted by Ethan and Aaron, I highly recommend it for info on the Maura Murray case, especially because Aaron is a woman, and she can talk about what it's like to be a 21-year-old woman, and this is how a woman would respond to things, which has been left out from maybe the book True Crime Addict or the Missing Maura Murray guys, but they do talk to many people, and Guy Parody was really zoning in, though, on a suspect that may have murdered Maura Murray, and his name is Rick Forcier. Now, I have some major problems with that because Guy Parody's theory that he laid out in one episode on 107 Degrees was that, okay, Rick Forcier was driving down, he saw Maura Murray 100 feet from the car crash. maybe pulled a gun on her or did something intimidating to get her into his car and then drove her back to his property, which was very close by, and then murdered her and buried her on the property there. Well, if that's the case, habeas corpus, I mean, like, where is she then? I mean, I think you would need a lot more than speculation. I mean, all right, I see what you're coming from, but, like, where's the physical evidence to support that? And, I'm not saying that he's wrong, it's just that it's a very, very bold thing to accuse a person by name when you don't have the evidence to back it up. So there's a lot of speculation that goes into some of that material. But also, Guy Parody, to his credit, was very clear that Maura didn't hit a tree because the damage to her car would have had a kind of half moon shape, half circle shape if she had hit a tree in terms of the indentation patterns. He says very, very clearly that this happened because a larger vehicle, maybe a bus, maybe a truck, maybe even a high-rise pickup, had been on top of Maura's car. Like her Saturn had gone underneath of a larger vehicle. At some point in that day, she had been in another accident, and who really knows what happened to Maura after that. I mean, was she fleeing the scene of an accident and then someone caught up to her and tried to get her into the car? I mean, or did someone else get back up into her car and then they try to silence her? That's just guesswork. But there's a larger episode about that on the channel called Maura Murray Bus Collision Theory that anybody can check out. And our next comment comes to us from David Xiao, who says, I only looked to the research that I conducted from whatever was available and stated most commonly. That included witness statements and developed timeline, the first receipt, the ATM video, the alleged cell phone check at 7:30 p.m. has an oddity in the report, by the way. The three main phone calls and the three main phone towers, excuse me, I misread that. The three main phone towers in Haverhill, and lastly, the pictures of the damage in the car as compared. Based upon all that, my conclusion is that it was on the day alleged that she was in the area around 6 p.m. or over an hour prior to the time alleged for the accident, during the effort of certain locals that cover-up discrepancies occurred. That was large enough to cause suspicion and debatable enough to cast doubt. So, that's kind of not much to say about that. But as for the red fluid in the empty bottle, there was a bottle of Diet Coke found under Maura's car that had a fluid in it. In the absence of any official identification, this leads me to believe that it was not wine or any red alcoholic liquid. My inclination is that it was not cherry soda, and that it was some extra replacement fluid for the car, as you stated. Now, Erin from 107 Degrees wanted to be very clear that she did not believe Maura Murray was driving drunk, that the first thing to say is it could have just been litter from the side of the road. They found a Diet Coke bottle that had this weird smell coming from it, but the officer who had examined it said, and this is a direct quotation, that that person did not know what alcohol smelled like because they weren't a regular drinker. No one knows if Moore was drinking anything in the Diet Coke bottle. It's possible, but what Aaron suggested was that it could have been red antifreeze, that Moore maybe tried to do something under the hood, or maybe she even just picked up the bottle, got frustrated, poured it out, maybe tossed it on the ground, gave it a little kick under the car out of frustration, because I don't think she would have lifted the hood, I mean, based on the condition of the car. But her next comment comes to us from Shawnee Stott, who says, how do we know it was Moore driving the car? The first thing one witness said was she saw a man smoking a cigarette and then changed her story. Yeah, I believe that's the witness who said they saw a red light in the car and they thought that it was a cigarette. But some people brought up the point, oh, what was it, Lance or Tim, who said maybe that was the light of a cell phone, or it could have been a reflection. But our next one comes to us from Isaiah de Simone, longtime listener, even back into what I call the Pink and Bubbles days. Isaiah, thank you for the comment. And this is a good one that I wanted to read off because this is a requested topic. Things that I find interesting that I don't see much on YouTube, at least. Project Stargate, Project Pegasus, and both the ideas of multiple shooters during Columbine, a third shooter, and a third bomber for the Oklahoma City bombing. I think you may have touched upon Oklahoma, but I could be wrong. Oh yes, back in 2019, I did some episodes on the Oklahoma City bombing, but it's mostly talking about I guess the connection of events that took place that led to Waco. There are a couple documentaries about that, and I have a couple episodes on Ruby Ridge because there were a lot of rising tensions at the time. One was on Ruby Ridge, and one was on um, the Waco incident, and then there was one on the Oklahoma City bombing involving Timothy McVeigh, and how they were all connected. But this one here about more than one shooter at Columbine, I really don't know too much about that, and I wanted to read off this comment because I think that I'm gonna read up on that and I'm gonna try to learn a little bit more, and then I will definitely look into this one. Isaiah, thank you for the comment. And Oxford P. Doggy has one more that says Fred and Kathleen's first comments were that Maura was going to kill herself. See John Smith's blog. John Smith is a researcher that I don't talk about enough on this channel. I mean that sincerely. He knows the Maura Murray case very well, and he was the loudest voice in the entire world that Maura Murray did not hit a tree. The accident reconstructionist proved it. Credit to John Smith. I mean, I think that would rather suggest that Maura was a little bit mentally unstable, and I think we can all accept that, anyone who's looked into that case, but did Maura Murray actually commit suicide? I really lean more toward an abduction based on the evidence that we have seen, and if someone can uncover some type of skeletal remains, or even identifying the location of Maura's backpack, or maybe something like shoes, then we could have better answers in the case. But, in the past, I really wanted to examine the angle of Maura Murray committing suicide. There is evidence to support that. Her stuff was found in boxes. I mean, she made up some story about getting away. There's no family emergency. You could very easily interpret the evidence in a way that Maura was going to a place that was familiar with her. I mean, her father said she was driving to Bartlett, New Hampshire, so she wanted to be in some place that was very comforting to end her life. But there's also a lot of evidence that would not suggest that. Maura was someone who was very impulsive. She jumped on the train one day and just went into the city. She was the type of person who would try to get out of things. She also got caught using a stolen credit card number to order pizza and subs. She also got caught stealing makeup. I mean, like $5 worth of makeup, and got kicked out of West Point. She was an impulsive person. That means she made her decisions in an impulsive way, but impulsive and suicidal, not quite the same thing. However, I do thank Oxford P. Doggy for the comment as well. All right, we'll be right back after this. Bum ba bum 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 ba bum 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 ba bum bum bum. At this time, I would like to remind everybody about YouTube Premium. If you use the YouTube Premium features, you can download Black Box Online Radio, take it on the go, out walking, in the car, anywhere and anyhow. YouTube Premium also gives you access to special YouTube original shows and YouTube music. And now, let's get back to the episode. Okay, hello everybody, and we are back. Our first comment coming to us in this segment is from Midnight Story Productions, who says, nobody, absolutely nobody on YouTube. And if you can just imagine a colon right now. Ned from Black Box Online Radio channel break. Bum ba bum 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 ba bum 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 ba bum bum bum. Yeah, okay, so that's kind of weird when you sort of say it out loud and you're trying to narrate the significance of a colon or a period or something like that. But here's a well-guarded secret that is not very well known in the world of the internet because I've never said it before, and no one really asked. As we said, no one on YouTube. That whole sort of bum 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 thing, that is actually paying tribute to the show Real Coffee with Scott Adams. Back in 2019 and 2020, I was a regular listener to that show, and Scott Adams would introduce his show Real Coffee with something like that. His is not uniform. He'll just begin with saying bum 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 bum, something to that effect, and it was also a way to do it without incorporating any other type of music. is like some type of introduction that gets your attention, but not in a very flashy way. So it's actually paying tribute to that. I don't even think that was that necessary. I just thought I would draw attention to that because Midnight Story Productions actually was the person who suggested the Oklahoma Girl Scout murders episode that was put out last Friday. And if you haven't heard that yet, I would definitely recommend that you check it out because it's a very powerful story. It is the tale of three girls who were murdered in Oklahoma in the 1970s. And Midnight Story Productions has written, "What a gut-wrenching, cruel, beyond animal act of murder. I think they got the right guy in the suspect, Gene Leroy Hart. His fate would have it. Karma took care of him later down the road with that heart attack, and the prime suspect in the murder of those three girls, Gene Leroy Hart, died from a heart attack at the age of 35. Those poor girls and their parents. Thanks for covering this case, Oklahoma's most prolific, perhaps unsolved murder case." And my response to that, which you can see in the comment section there if you watch the episode, but just to share some of it is, yeah, it's most likely that this guy, Gene Leroy Hart, was involved with the Oklahoma Girl Scout murders. There's a certain amount of evidence that has been used to connect him to it, such as there was a message that was written on a cave nearby where the murder site took place, and there's even the date of where the person was allegedly staying in the cave, which is just a couple days after the murders, and a photo that had belonged to Gene Leroy Hart was found in the cave. So it seems like he had some connection to it. However, there are other pieces of forensic material that would suggest that he did not do this alone. Bear in mind, there are three different murder victims in this one, in the Oklahoma Girl Scout murders. Two of them were killed in a tent, and another one was killed just outside of the tent. Their bodies were stuffed into sleeping bags and then placed along a trail. That's just a manner of speaking, mind you. But the point is, that doesn't sound like it was only one person. If there had been only one murder victim, yeah, absolutely, I would think there was only a single perpetrator. Even if there were two victims, I mean, I could kind of see how someone could have done this, but three different murder victims, all of them were sexually assaulted, their bodies are stuffed into sleeping bags, and then they are moved to a different location, and one of them was even killed outside of the tent, and nobody noticed. To me, that is moving way too quickly, and this is at a summer camp, mind you. So it is all moving way too quickly for one person to have committed these crimes. I think there was a second perpetrator involved, but I guess this will kind of give away the ending. I still hope you will check out the episode, but Gene Leroy Hart, the prime suspect in this case, was tried for this, and he was found not guilty. He was convicted on other crimes and sentenced to 300 years in prison. 2 months into his sentence, he died after overexerting himself in the prison workout yard by jogging, and he had a massive heart attack at the age of 35, which really is kind of quite shocking in its own right. Our next set of comments come to us from Susan Snyder, who has two of them. One is very lighthearted, and the other one is about the Zodiac Killer. Let's do the Zodiac Killer question first. There is something that I have heard, this is Susan Snyder's comment, that I don't remember his name, but he confessed to being the Zodiac Killer. Apparently it wasn't true. I'm curious as to why someone would do such a thing. Oh yes, and people have confessed to being the Zodiac Killer. There's an alleged deathbed confession that came from Louis Myers that was told to his friend Randy Kenny, and I have an episode out called like Louis Myers' Devil's Advocate, as well as some other things we've talked about in the AMAs. Richard Grinnell wrote in a very good comment once saying, if that deathbed confession had been real, he would have provided the solution to the 340 cipher. No, that wasn't me on the TV, Slave's Paradise Death. He would have provided that. And maybe you're referring to somebody else who has confessed to being the Zodiac Killer, but I don't think I would ever accept somebody's confession to being the Zodiac Killer if they weren't able to provide something. And it doesn't have to be the solution to the Z13 or the solution to the Z32 cipher. Maybe they could say, Here's where Paul Stein's wallet was buried. Here's another piece of Paul Stein's bloody shirt. Or here's the Lake Berryessa costume hood. Or even the knife that was used at Lake Berryessa, something that would have DNA or some type of physical evidence that they could tie back to a person and to the crime scenes. I think you can get the idea there. If they had some way of proving it, simply just saying, okay, I was the Zodiac Killer and here's how it's done. Louis Myers is a fascinating suspect all the same. I was really pulled into his world for a while, and it's also the world of Randy Kenny because it's the explanations that Kenny provides. Number one, Myers had a connection to Betty Lou Jensen. He was a classmate of hers. Myers worked in the restaurant with Darlene Ferrin. He was a busboy and she was a server. And the explanation is that he provided the explanation provided is that Myers murdered Paul Stein for drug money, but I think it was Walter who wrote in saying that about Myers, that is a really bizarre explanation when you think about it. I thought it made perfect sense when it was first shared by Randy Kenny, but like what Walter put forward is that to go to the risk of murdering somebody for drug money in a taxi, like not knowing how much you're going to get, not knowing if this guy even has any money in his wallet at all, and the risk of getting caught based on what you would stand to gain from that. And this is a person who was the Zodiac Killer, supposed to be of above average intelligence with heightened predatory instincts. That also doesn't seem to blend too well, but I'm totally open to discussing that one in the comments section. Addiction could be a powerful thing, and there is that, and people do commit crimes just to get money for various reasons. But I do agree that murdering a taxi in just downtown San Francisco is very risky when you don't necessarily know how much money you would be able to obtain from that. I mean, wouldn't it, the alternative would be to commit the robbery without without murdering the victim, as well as removing a piece of Paul Stein's shirt, stealing his keys, shifting the body around. I think it's a little bit ridiculous in retrospect. But I said that Susan Snyder had two questions, and the second one is a lighter one that says, what are your thoughts on mangoes? Now you better be careful, I could do 3 hours on this, but mangoes are a very reliable tropical fruit. I mean, pineapple is the other reliable one. But believe it or not, my family has some type of possible, well-kept, very dark secret about mangoes. And my mother told me this growing up. She just said that she doesn't eat mangoes. I'm like, Mom, why don't you eat mangoes? And she said, I just didn't have them when I was a kid. So, I just I didn't grow up with them, so I don't really want to eat them. But at one of those family reunions, I was talking to my uncle, or maybe even a different family member, but I think it was my uncle, and he's like, what? No, that's not true. We always had mangoes growing up. I mean, the supermarket, and we had them from time to time. I mean, not every day, but we had mangoes. I don't know why she said that. That's really weird. So I think. And this is just a hunch. But I think there's some deep, dark secret in my family tree about mangoes. But in more direct terms, I think that mangoes definitely outweigh papayas. Like when I would see a papaya, growing up, I thought that it was a melon that was filled with little blueberries, and it's not. The first time I ever bought a papaya from the supermarket, I took a bite of it, and I was like, oh no, this thing's rotten, so I threw it in the trash. And somebody else, another family member said the exact same thing happened to her. She thought that it was rotten, but you expect it to taste like a mango, but it's really quite different. Now, the last thing I would say about mangoes is they are, or maybe I can just say it is, mangoes, they are. Mangoes are one of the most underrated foods at the sushi bar. If you haven't had a mango sushi roll, if you go to a sushi bar, order the mango roll, you have not lived. That is one of the best things to get. It's so simple, but it totally works. So I would look out for that. I've had mango pizza once or twice. Some people are crazy about pineapple pizza. I love pineapple pizza. I know this is in this fueled and heated internet debate about should pineapple belong on pizza or something. I love that. Mango pizza is alright. I mean, it didn't blow me away or anything, and I was like, well, I have to get that every week. No, but in sushi, like with the seaweed and the sushi roll, if that is what you call it. I think I'm actually mixing up the terms or something because I don't speak Japanese, but it is good stuff. And our next question comes in on one of those publicity things. Yeah, I'm really bad with technology, so I don't even know what it's called. But now that the show has 1,000 subscribers, you can make this announcement, or you can put out a message and share it. And I was asking for questions for the AMA, and someone wrote in and said, "Do you play video games?" And the answer is, I don't play video games right now, but I grew up in the 1990s, so I was obsessed with Mortal Kombat. I can't wait for the next movie to come out. My character was Sub-Zero. I was really into Ermac for a while, but Mortal Kombat 2 I thought was the most amazing thing in the world. MK3, Ultimate MK3, like, I was just passionately obsessed with this during the middle part of the 90s. There was also another game called Final Fight that was a different type of, I guess you'd call it a side-scrolling fighting game. For some reason, I was really attracted to the fighting games, and definitely less about, the, I guess you would say, the, first-person shooters. That was it. I mean, I don't know why it took me a while to get into those, but I also had the N64 growing up the way that we did in the 90s, or that the children who spent their childhood in the 90s would have. I mean, I played N64 well into the new millennium, all the way up 2003 and 4, while people are moving on to GameCube. And GoldenEye was an absolutely amazing game to have. That's a first-person shooter, and one of the first ones that really captivated me. But I said that I'm not playing video games right now. Growing up, I actually had more computer games than I did video games. And on the computer, I had the Doom Collector's Edition, and GoldenEye was a first-person shooter I was into. I played a lot of Doom, but I confess, I've never seen the movie Doom with The Rock, and there's a specific reason, because the Rock openly said that it sucked. More or less, he was trying to roast John Cena once. He's like, hey, John Cena did a terrible movie called The Marine. I bet they use that to torture prisoners. Or, I think I butchered that. I bet real Marines use that to torture their prisoners. And, but he's saying, it's okay, John Cena. I made the movie Doom. So I never watched the movie, but I heard it wasn't very good. I was a big fan of that one, and that's just the computer version. And when I was thinking back and looking at my childhood, I was like, wow, we really played a lot of games on the PC, whether it's like they're real early 90s, like Oregon Trail stuff. And then, once you get to the year 2000, Amazon Trail. It's the coolest thing in the world. If you haven't played Amazon Trail, I mean, it's like the Oregon Trail, but in the Amazon. And there are all of these other things, racing, as well as The Sims. All of them, like Sim Town, Sim City, Sim Safari, a little bit of Sim Tower. So I really grew up with computer games more than video games. The first video game console I ever had, though, was this Sega Game Gear, and I only had 4 games for it. One was Solitaire, which I never played because we already had that on the computer. Then there was this one called Asterix and the Great Rescue. It's based on like a comic strip. I think it's actually from France, but I don't understand anything about it. But I absolutely loved the game. I loved Sega Game Gear because of the graphics at the time were kind of badass. And then the other two were Mortal Kombat, of course, because it was the 90s. Why not? So these days I don't really play video games. I mean, I think there was a certain point in life when I just had somewhat of a reversal, and I got pulled into YouTube, and that became my biggest obsession. And really, I noticed that things have been progressing in a certain way. Like in my early 20s, I was all about the countdown sites, and then for a while I was all about serial killer documentaries, and you would get away from things like, okay, just, well, who are the serial killers? And then you also want to get away from just what are 10 facts about them. And I started watching lots of shows that were like Brain Scratch and Stephanie Harlow and Danielle Hallen, but they were very informative, but then you still want to know a little bit more. And when I'm like trying to learn stuff to talk about now, I do a lot more reading than I do watching. And I think you can get the idea there. It's just about trying to get the deeper information, as well as looking at things like police reports and then looking at things like the press releases that the police put out. And you also want to, if you're going to watch anything, then you want to find things like firsthand witness statements and testimonials and people sharing firsthand primary sources. And then you try to evaluate that. And these days, I also spend a lot more time corresponding with people who have spent years doing the hard research, and they share their findings with me. Anybody can write the show at BlackBoxOnlineRadio at AOL.com, and I encourage anyone to share anything. You heard one email that someone had written saying they have a Zodiac Killer suspect. You can write the show on any topic, and there have been a few bonus episodes that have been coming out where I've been working with Eve Carson, who is the author of Mommy's a Mole, about the murder of Joan Webster, as well as the murder of Marie Iannuzzi that we were talking about at the beginning. Those bonus episodes are probably going to keep coming out, and anyone can also share things that they would like to contribute. And the last thing that I would like to do is to go to a borrowed question. We often begin these AMAs with a borrowed question, but now we use them as the conclusion. And this is from Quora, because I read one of their posts on narcissism. So around once a week, now it's about twice a week actually, they send me questions about narcissism, but the thing is, they're great for the AMAs. So with their first question, it was, do narcissists like it when you feel happy? And I thought that was a really good one to try and tackle, because, the person who responded to that one is saying something that is quite similar to what I would say, what I agree with, that is. But here's something that I found that surprised me. My absolute first instinct on that one, do narcissists like it when you feel happy, was, no, of course not. They only care about themselves. Then, before reading anything, I had to think for a second about everybody I've known that I could call a narcissist. I was like, wait, oh yeah, they do. Narcissists, people who think that they can do no wrong, or they think that they have some type of overinflated self-image that is conflated with morality. Those types of people like it when you're happy if it's relevant to them. The full objective of the narcissist is to control the other person, or to keep the other person connected to them. That's what they're truly afraid of, rejection. And the people that I've known that I would label as narcissists, yeah, they have a good time talking with me, and they have a good time seeing me laugh at their jokes. They have a good time when they are trying to do something. Like, if they're trying to be funny and I'm laughing, that's acceptable. If I'm trying to be funny, well, they're not laughing. They're like, hey, no, that's not what I wanted from this person at this exact time. And it's quite similar to an episode that was put out called The Psychology of Fruit, hence the question from Mangoes today, about mangoes, excuse me. That was from the Psychology of Fruit episode. I think it's actually called Fruit Psychology, Toxic Personalities, where it's a few classification terms. But to digress from that, it's like those people are just treating other individuals like servants. I call them red berries. They think that anyone who is beneath them in their mind needs to act like a servant to them. Well, that's quite similar to how the narcissist is functioning. So says me, in my own unprofessional opinion. If the person that they're with is going to be in their life, they want them to serve them in some way, even if it's not about doing tasks, or it's just going to be about, they're going to like you when you're in a good mood if it enhances their emotional stimuli, if it enhances the stimulation that they're trying to experience. So if you're going to challenge the narcissist, oh, then they'll get mad. But they're going to get mad in a way that isn't going to make you want to leave. This is how the manipulation takes place. Or if you do want to leave, then they'll really try to persuade you to stay, because the narcissist is afraid of rejection, because with rejection comes a certain amount of humiliation. And in the Fruit Psychology Toxic Personalities episode, it was a lot like how the red berry is the name that we gave to this type of personality, and they are very hierarchy-oriented. And it's quite similar to just the overall concept of narcissism, except the red berry is the type of person who is going to absolutely just worship and try to take care of people whom they believe are above them. The red berry is never going to be at the top of the dominance hierarchy. They're going to be just very loyal to the people who are above them in their mind. I mean, their idea of the hierarchy might not even be true. And if someone is below them, then they're expected to do things. And that includes listening. Like, I'm going to talk about things and you're going to listen. Because when this other person who is above me in the hierarchy, the leader of our group, when he talks about things, I listen to him. Therefore, when I talk about things, you need to listen. When I make jokes, you need to laugh. When we're discussing my preferred subjects, you need to respond to them. And if you're going along with them and having a good time, that's acceptable. That's okay. That's welcome. But anything to the contrary, it's not relevant to me, therefore you're doing something bad because you're not serving me. And this is a very typical set of behaviors that I began to notice in countless amounts of people. I want to share something with you right now, only because we're talking about it. And I've never read this in a single psychology book. It's one of my own observations. And that is that the people that truly get mad about your behavior are not always the leaders. I mean, authority figures, perhaps, sure. I mean, yeah, getting mad about behaviors. My teachers in school definitely called me out on things and they criticized me for inappropriate behavior. Sure, those are authority figures. But if you think about friends, if you think about relationships, if you think about the family structure, if you think about coworkers, it's not always the person who is like the leader of the pack or the type of alpha coworker who's just like either the king or the queen bee, the social butterflies who are really calling like people out on their behavior. In my own experience, that is, it's always that person who is kind of in the middle level. They aren't the most popular person in the community. They aren't the leader of anything. They're kind of in the middle. And I've really noticed this with like social triads. Like if you have a group of 3 people, the person at the top, the most dominant entity, the most dominant person in that group of 3, really isn't going to criticize your behavior too much. Like, don't say that. You shouldn't eat that. Watch what you're doing. Like, they're not going to be the one who's making those types of comments. It's really the person who would be in the middle who's going to be like trying to police another person's speech or make comments about what someone else is eating. I mean, I would love to hear anybody's personal experiences about this. I think once or twice, maybe I can say that the most dominant person in a group of 3 was really trying to control other people. But most of the time, I noticed that the person who is the most dominant in a social group doesn't care what you're saying or what you're eating or what you're drinking or how you're walking or how loud you're talking unless it gets really out of control. It's usually the person who is like the most dominant person's best friend or something like that. Someone who's in the middle who's going to say something like, watch your language. Oh, you shouldn't eat that. It's not good for you. Hey, you're walking too fast. You're talking too loudly. You're talking too quietly. They're the one who's making the critical statements. And like many things, I'm sure I've been on all sides of this one, both sides of the coin, absolutely, because we play different roles in life. Like, we're not always going to be the quietest person in the room. We're not always going to be the person who is at the bottom of a hierarchy. Sometimes we'll be at the middle, and then sometimes we'll be at the top. And one thing that was advised by Dr. Jordan Peterson is if you're smart, you'll create your own hierarchies, and then you will adapt to them. He has a lot to say about that. But I would really be curious if anybody would like to share their experiences regarding that question about narcissists. Do narcissists like it when you're happy? Or do you agree or disagree with that observation that it's not the leader of the pack that is going to criticize your behavior so closely? It's going to be someone who is in the middle of the hierarchies. But just to add one additional note, another observation that I have been reading about in other forms of literature is that the person who's going to be calling out someone's eating habits or drinking habits, that is often used as a way to mask their own insecurities. Oh, you shouldn't eat too much, that or that has too much sugar for you. Maybe it can actually be coming from a good place sometimes. Maybe it's not. I mean, some people definitely have dietary issues, and I don't mean anything like parents telling their kids not to eat something they're allergic to. Okay, that's good. That's a good way about it. More or less someone doing that in an arbitrary way, just saying, hey, don't eat that, don't drink that, don't say those words, don't wear that shirt. The people who are really trying to micromanage someone else's behavior are pretty much just covering up their own insecurities. It appears that that is the driving force for that, or they're trying to gain control of somebody else because maybe they're like a red berry personality and they think that the leader of the pack has control over them. Like, I'm going to do what the leader says, and then I'm going to tell person X or person Y what to do, because that's how they want to have that role in life. It's very important to them that they are not at the bottom of the social hierarchies, at the bottom of the social order, because they think that's bad. They want to be close to the leader. Oh yeah, they definitely recognize that the leader has some superior qualities, but they want to be close to them, not at the bottom, because the people who are below them are scum in their minds. And that's not true at all, because a lot of these things are really, really abstract. People can climb up in hierarchies, or they can go down in them. They really sort themselves out in different ways. Please weigh in the comments section. Share anything you would like to say. I want to hear from you, and you can write the show BlackBoxOnlineRadio at AOL.com, or you can contact the show at BlackBoxNet88 on Instagram, and I'll see you there for the bonus podcast. Until next time.